intersection of good drinks, good music, and good times. This is Hops and Spirits Bar Conversations.
You know, it's wild to think that by the time when this episode comes out, a month will already be gone in 2025. Man, time is flying by this year. Also, I feel like January was a weird month with snow where I'm at in Lexington, a lot of snow, snow all over the U.S. in places that don't normally get it. So I have a feeling a few people are happy to see January go by the wayside. But we keep on rolling here with a fun guest. You might know him as Bear Rinehart, the Needtobreathe co-founder and frontman, but this is maybe your alter ego. Maybe is that the best way to
We'll
to
call it
phrase
that.
it?
We'll call it that. Yeah.
As we talk about Wilder Woods, his solo project, and he's got a new album out, Curioso, coming out February 7th. Bear, welcome in.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and this is bar conversations. I always try to find something fun, and as we get into Curioso, we'll kind of get the maybe a little bit of the meaning behind it. I figured this might be a bottle that someone might have behind some glass, little Eagle Rare. So I
Oh,
figured that would be a good one to have tonight.
I like that. That's nice.
You got anything good tonight?
I got a little yeah, this is my go-to here, a little Woodford Reserve Double Oak.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah,
That's
that's
always
my
a good one.
not too fancy, but you can find it a lot of places, so that's helpful
Absolutely
for what
not.
I do.
Now I was gonna say, do you have like a little collection? Do you get some bottles as you go on the road? What do
I
you like to
do.
do?
I do. I like I mean I'm pretty much a bourbon guy these days. But I've been through phases of I went through a phase that I had to quit Italian red wines. And I got too far gone. That's an expensive habit. So now it's mostly the bourbon. And I'm an easy drinking kind of dude now. So getting older, I guess. I don't know what it is, but um yeah, but yeah, I have a little bit around, but not too crazy. Not when I'm home. Most of the time, it's a day off on the road or that kind of thing.
Well, I was gonna say you mentioned home life. You got three boys, is
Yeah,
that right? How is that?
oh, it's insane, man. It's pure chaos all the time. They've got the two older in sports now. But it's like, so we had baseball stuff today, and they're playing basketball in basketball season, but they're like doing I don't know what. But what's funny is like I didn't think I'd be that kind of parent that cared. You know what I mean? Like I was like, well, if they play, they play. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Or be at the game and be like freak and too intense about it or whatever. And I found out my wife is even more intense than me. You know what I mean? And I was like, she never was into sports coming. I mean, I played football in college. She watched me do that. She liked that. But like watching her, like I don't know what's happened. They're 9 and 7. So it's like, who cares? But it is fun. And the boys are, crazy. Can't say I have a drum kit in here now. My 9-year-old has decided to play drums. So,
Lucky
piggybacking.
you.
Yeah, I know, right? At least it's in the studio in here. It's out from the house, so that's I get a break from it. But yeah, man, it's fun.
I was gonna say I got a 6-year-old daughter, and like I said before we came on, Mondays gymnastics, Wednesdays dance, Fridays dance. Eventually soccer will
Yeah,
come back on, and I'm like, and we keep saying, like you, like if you want to keep playing, and she keeps saying yes to everything. We're like, we might have to stop at some
yeah,
point.
totally, totally. Well, I kept thinking, I mean, I do that same thing. I'm like, listen, if you don't like it, we don't have to do it, But they're always like, yeah, I want to do it. I'm like, I mean, hopefully, some point they'll pick a sport or two. But it's really fun. I mean, I enjoy it, and being gone that's the hardest part. I mean, like last year we did like 100 shows or something, so I missed a lot of games. So I can't complain now. I'm here getting to go to practice, see them play, so it's fun.
I was gonna say it kind of reminds you of those memories you get to make, and they're even sweeter. And you mentioned those football days back in college. You were a pretty good football player at Furman, and you were roommates with Florida's head coach Billy
Yeah,
Napier. Is that right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, it's crazy. I tell my kids about it all the time because I mean, it's just a fun thing to obviously be a part of. I mean, we got really fortunate. Both of us were on the same recruiting visit, and kind of were like, hey, we should go here. Most of it we had scholarships to like the smaller big schools like a Duke or those kind of. We're like, we want to go. We don't want to lose every game. Back then, it was like that. And
Hmm.
so we decided to come together, and then like ended up being the winningest class at Furman ever. while we were there. So a bunch of good guys came in at the same time, and then to see him go on and do this thing has been crazy. I like, watched his career along when he was a GA at Clemson, and then he was a receivers coach at Alabama. He's been all over the place. And I finally got to take my boys down. We went to Florida State this year.
That's
So
not a bad
that's
one.
yeah, no, it was a good one to go to. I've got to go. I haven't been to the swamp yet, so I've got to go do that. But man, it's if you've ever met somebody, it's like, I mean, he's the only person I've ever met in my life that was like this. Like literally, football was 100% of his time. You know what I mean? That's what he thought about. And you could tell his dad was a high school coach, and like you could tell,
Mhm.
like this is what this guy's gonna do. And so it's really cool to see somebody like that, like get to have this, at least a shot in the SEC and all that. So it's been really fun.
I was gonna say, and then for him, he's getting to watch you do all this
Yeah.
amazing thing with music and travel everywhere. Do you guys just kind of go, did you ever think we'd be where we are?
Yeah, I mean, both of us. I mean, I don't think anybody thought that back then for sure. But like he saw it, I mean, the band was happening when I was playing football, which was crazy. And there were games like on a Saturday, we would play like Wofford or something like that. It's like in Spartanburg. And we would go, I would leave the game and get in the van with the band and go play a show that night after the game, like while the team went back on the bus. So like he was around it. And, like I was obviously like wearing different kind of clothes and all that. You know what I mean? I had long hair. They gave me a hard time. Other teams used to like rag on me. They called me Sunshine. Um, so, so I think he knew I loved music, but at the time it was like, I mean, we were riding around doing, 20 people at a show kind of thing. So, yeah, it kind of blows your mind that we get to do it.
Well, and I've heard, you turned in your pads, like you said, you're doing this music thing, you're doing it pretty well. I heard you also have maybe switched to golf, and that's kind of your go-to sport these days.
Yeah, I mean, I suck at golf, man. It's like, God, it's one of those things like and golf is a great like equalizer with the sense of like
Mhm.
athleticism is not necessarily the thing. And so you step on the tee box with somebody and you look at him, you're like, no chance this guy's beating me today, and then he beats your brakes off. But I do love the fact that it's an individual thing. You can always be working on it. I got into actually Billy, I mean this is true. When he came back, I lived in Seneca, South Carolina, is where I grew up. And so when I got married, that's where I first lived when the band was kind of getting everything to go on. And he became a GA at Clemson. And so he had a lot of off time and I did too. And so he taught me to play golf. Like he gave me my first golf clubs, the whole thing. So yeah, I mean it's a cool thing to do on the road now too. It gets you outside. We can live in a cave if you're not careful on the road. And so
I
it's
was gonna
nice.
say, yeah, a lot of hotel rooms and only seeing four walls. So
Yeah.
I'm getting now. Do any of the other guys in Need to Breathe play golf, or do you have to like drag them along, or is it
At
sometimes
this
nice to
point,
have
yeah.
some alone
At this point, no. Well, at this point, it's mostly somebody who's opening for the band. So we had this band called Judah and the Lion out with us, and Judah played baseball in college, is that kind of guy, and loved golf. So me and him got out a bunch. But the other guys, they know I'm too like. I think they want their time away from me. I'm sure.
time?
I'm pretty intense when it comes to some of that stuff. So I'm gotten less intense on the golf course, but I think they're all like, just go do your thing, and we'll see this afternoon.
Hey, I get that. I went to college, played golf in college, and then so like at first I was like, as you get older and life happens, you don't get to play as much, and I still expected to be as good as I
Yeah,
was, and then eventually I was
yeah,
like, I only play like 6, 7 times a year. I gotta stop
yeah. I got to try to
that.
enjoy this somehow. Yeah, but I mean, you know what it's like. I mean, it's just the competition is such a great, and I missed that so bad after football was over. It's like, and for a while I didn't miss it right away, but then it got like this ish of like, man, I got to compete somehow. So yeah, that's the way we do it these days.
Well, I was gonna say, and it's a good one because, like you said, you get to compete against yourself a lot in the
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
course, so it works out. And you mentioned playing in college, starting up the band while you were playing football. Did you have a love of music all your life then? Like I mean, were you around it, or where did that come from?
Yeah, yeah, I was around it a lot. My dad was a trumpet player in the '70s and like had gone to school for music, and my mom was a piano teacher growing up, and like their first job was like choir directors at a church. So I like music was around, but honestly I didn't care about it that much. I had bands I liked and stuff, but like until I was about 16, I started playing guitar, kind of got into it and really got the bug of like songwriting really is what hooked me about the music. But yeah, I was all sports before that. I was a total I remember just not being able to stand all those kids coming over and taking piano lessons because it'd be like Mary Had a Little Lamb all day. And so it was like the last thing I wanted to do. And then, of course, like after I got in high school and started playing, I begged my mom to teach me anything she'd teach me on piano.
Well, and clearly, it's worked out well for you. What when you talk about like playing in the band and doing a gig, like I'm guessing your football coach had to be pretty open to some of this stuff to let
They
you kind
were,
of
yeah.
hang behind.
I mean, looking back, I was like very fortunate in that way. Not when I first got there, it wasn't like that. It was pretty, but there was a quarterback that played before Billy did when we first came. He was a senior when we first got there, and he had the same. He was a songwriter too, and so like I think he had like softened them up to the idea. um, and it's not obviously like we treated it like it was Alabama, but it wasn't Alabama. Like we're playing. It's 1AA. It was serious, but like I thought it was cool that they allow. I mean, I've seen a lot of those coaches since then. Come to concerts and bring their families and stuff. It's like that's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they were pretty cool with it. But the truth is, like, I didn't miss anything for it. You know what I mean? It was never like that. I mean, obviously football was the priority. I just didn't study very much. That was that's basically. I think that's what lost in that whole equation.
So you did have to give up something.
That's right. Yeah, and school was yeah. No, I mean I mean, I didn't fail a class. I made it through Furman. I've got a degree. But it was I would look at that syllabus at the beginning of the year and be like, if it was like three absences and you lower grade, I was like, I'm dropping this course. I gotta have more freedom than that.
Well,
Yeah,
Cliff Notes, all those things, you can read a lot of things real
that's
quick.
exactly it.
Well, and you talk about, that love of music. You had at least, there were bands you like, things like that. So what music did you grow up on? Did you listen to? Because I
Yeah,
think I heard somewhere, read somewhere that it's not what most people would think based on what you guys play with Need to Breathe and things
yeah,
like that.
probably so. I mean, the my first I don't know favorite band was the Black Crowes. And so like I liked, and I didn't put this together at the time. I think like my dad was a preacher, and the church music that they did was like pretty, like it was a full band, up tempo. It was a diverse church, like so we've got like good players in the band. And so whenever I first like picked up a guitar, I was terrible, and all these guys were good. And like looking back, like there's a part of that gospel thing that's in all the stuff that I liked about rock and roll. Like the Black Crowes certainly always had the background singers, and that there was some melding of rock and roll in that. I loved Joe Cocker was my favorite singer growing up, and that's the influence of my dad for sure. Um, so yeah, like I think the piecing of those things together, which I didn't really, and I also grew up in South Carolina in Seneca, which is a smaller town. There was a bunch of bluegrass around, mountain music kind of stuff, and all that. Like we ended up playing banjos and all this stuff. None of us knew how to play them. It was just like it was just I don't innate somehow. But I think a lot of those sounds like came together in that way. Stuff that I liked. Um, I liked everything about it when I first got into it, the shows and that whole thing. I remember Ben Harper and the Innocent Criminals going to see them when I was in college and being like just everything about the way they made the show, the lighting, the whole, you know what I mean? So just fell in love with that. And then the writing songs. My parents were pretty strict growing up. They're not anymore in that way, but they were in terms of like what kind of music I listened to. So it was a weird. I remember going to my mom and being like, "This, all this Christian music just sucks." Like I don't want to listen to this. And she was like, "Well, then write your own." And so that's literally the first picked up a guitar. I didn't do a lot of like cover songs and that kind of thing. It was really like writing songs right away. And that's still probably what I love most about it.
Well, and as you think through, like you mentioned, South Carolina's got an eclectic mix, and and depending on where you're at in South Carolina, a lot of different bands can come through. So, what impact did growing up there have on you too?
I think a lot. I mean, one thing was, there was a club in Greenville where where Furman is, called the Handlebar. It was like a 400 seat, kind of like little just rock box club. And all these bands would come up that like they were either on their own way up or they stayed in that circuit for a while, and just falling in love with those bands, like thinking they were huge and thinking that they had made it. There was a band from South Carolina called Jump Little Children, and they used to play that size, and literally it was, I thought they were the Beatles. I didn't know that was like a bigger thing than that. But the small town thing of that made it seem possible. You know what I mean? I think that was a huge impact on what we did. And also the fact that there was nobody, like as many bands maybe that were coming from South Carolina at that time, like Hootie and all that. There was nobody I knew within an hour of us that had a band when we first started it. So that's a good thing. I always felt as we got into it, because I live in Nashville now. It's like you could throw a rock and hit a band. It's a different thing when you don't know any better, so you just do it. You know what I mean? It's like well, I'm gonna get on this stage and do a solo even though I suck at guitar right now or whatever it is. Like, you had the balls to do it early on. So I think for us that was a big help early on in the career. Like, we took a lot of chances that we probably wouldn't have if we'd have been looking over our shoulder at a bunch of things. But we there was some lessons we probably could have learned a little faster too.
Well, I was gonna say, but there's something natural. I mean, to me, that's how it always used to be. You kind of cut your teeth, go into like the small bar, work your way up, get a lot of experience before things happen. So, what was it like having that band in college? I mean, had you had anything before that, or was it kind of just, get together with guys and play, or how did it all
Yeah.
come together there?
At the end of high school, I had started a band, and it was kind of like a little bit of a revolving door. It was mostly me writing the songs, and then whoever could make it on Friday to the show or whatever. And then, yeah, in college it started to kind of make sense. We made our like first little EP. We had those like 10 burner CD things, whatever. We sold 15,000 of those EP things that we burned ourselves
Wow.
while I was in college. So like it got to be this thing where like we had a little circuit around, we drew some manager talked to me at some point. I don't even, who it was. But it was like, you should draw a circle around your, where you live, 6 hours, and try to be the biggest band in that little radius. And so we would just call and beg. My wife, when I first met her before we were married in college, she was our first booking agent. And I was like, here's your business name, and I gave her a whole script to call the club. He's like, they'll only play for $150, like, be real tough, or whatever. So it was a lot of that, just self promotion and trying to get in there, and I mean, we were putting posters up on all the college campuses and that kind of thing. So really homegrown is how it kind of happened.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, you guys have had a lot of success. I mean, it's been a long journey. You guys have been at it for a while. What's it been like to have all that success with Need to Breathe?
Man, obviously, when you start out, you don't think it's a 20-year career. Obviously, you think like, I've got 6 months before I got to go get a real job. And so that's been a blessing in the sense that all we ever wanted to do at the beginning, anyway, was like, let's make this self-sustainable. Like, we want to be able to make our records when we want to make them, and we want to be able to go on tour when we want to go on tour. Just like be in control of the fact that we love doing this anyway. If they'll pay us something, that'd be great. Like, that really was the goal. And obviously it changes as you get older because you get a family, and now it's like there's real things you have to pay attention to. But it's been incredible that like we used to be signed to Atlantic Records for a long time, 18 years or something like that. And they would always, every time they would give us a plaque or whatever, they'd be like, this band is the weirdest band we have, it's like, cause they had all this stuff that would like skyrocket, have this big hit, and it's like, and ours just got slightly bigger over the years for all. I mean, I don't know many bands like that. We've been doing it 20 something years that every year has been slightly bigger than the year before it. And I think part of that's just the live show is a good show and all that. But anyway, I'm appreciative of that because there was a lot of bands that we knew that had success faster than us, and it hit them just like any success does. It's like going in the NFL or NIL in college or whatever it is. Like, it's too much too soon, and a lot of people kind of get in your ear. So yeah, I'm appreciative that it's been slower. Not that we haven't made our own mistake, plenty of our share of mistakes, but that's been a cool part of it.
I was gonna say, and it's allowed you guys to do a lot of things, and And like you said, you guys have been able to grow and do some amazing things. Is it true though? You kind of maybe at some point you pulled from that athletic background and made the band watch some tape of things
Yeah.
to get better.
It was early on, to be honest, and it was not a good call. It was like, but like I've told people that stories, like in college, we used to, on Sundays, we would watch the special teams tape. And so the whole team, so it's 100 and something guys in this room, and the coach is up there with the laser pointer. And it was like, and they would be like, whatever, Bear Rinehart, stand up, in front of the whole team, is like, don't you think you're better than this? Don't you think I mean, they would just humiliate you in front of the whole team. It's like just because you missed a block or whatever it was. So that was in my psyche after 5 years of being there. And the first couple shows, yeah, I watched the film, and I would like the conga player does a solo or whatever. And I would rewind it and be like, I mean, dude, what do you call this? I could get anyone off the street to do a better solo than this, blah, 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 blah. And so I lost some band members quickly. I think that was, and you learn, obviously, just like music is such a different thing than that. It can be precise and it can be all that, but the characters that play music for the most part are not coming from that lane. So, but yeah, and the truth is, it's still like I still find myself using these like sports analogies with the guys, and that's probably why I let my kids play sports, because there's a thing to it. It's like there's an ownership to this. It's like, hey, preparation means that we're going to have a good night. That's the way it works. So, but yeah, I was a little too intense early on.
Well, like you said, you learned. But I will say, sports does, figuring out how to work together, a bunch of different guys and girls from different backgrounds. It kind of works for a band too.
I mean, honestly, there's probably more parts of it that work than don't. So I think the like shaming part was the thing I really probably needed to back down from. But there a lot of the work ethic stuff. I mean, early on, it's just, someday I'll write a book that nobody will read, about the early days, because it's like it's pure insanity. And even now, I just feel like there's a different thing with TikTok and all that stuff. Like you might get big fast, but if you don't, you're gonna have a lot of long nights in a van where it just makes no sense. You're spending more money on gas than you are making at that show. Then nobody shows at the show. It doesn't matter how much you practice. It doesn't matter how good you are. You continually have to make that decision of like, I'm not going home until this works. And that takes a real, certain type of person, I think, to make it through that.
Well, and like you said, for you, you had your wife Mary and things like that. I mean, how at times I'm guessing there had to be some conversations like, is this the right path? And then, or let's just keep pushing
Yeah.
and I'm seeing enough success. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, I think, yeah, early on, I mean, I had gone to Furman, so I had this degree, that like I was a small town kid, so my dad was a preacher. Like we didn't, there wasn't like there was something track that I was on, for my family or whatever. But I married this girl whose dad was an accountant, and and he never said what. I've asked him since then. I'm like, how did you let me date your daughter? Like like I mean, I was put together and everything. It wasn't like I wasn't working hard, but I had no prospects. Even when we got married, I was driving around in a conversion van, with the band stuff. I'm like, dude, this is insanity. And so there were a couple years there early on where it was like, the band's first record deal we signed, we salaried it out. And so for 4 years, because didn't want them to tell us we couldn't tour. So we each made $7,000 a year for those first 4 years. And every other dollar we made put back into so like I'm married, making $7,000, living in a duplex that costs 350 a month, and she's working, buying the groceries basically. So it was kind of crazy. It tested us for sure, but there was never a point when I didn't think it would. I don't know why. I don't think there was the data to show that I should be doing it, but I felt like it was, like it was something more than just a job.
Well, and like you said, you've been able to do some amazing things, and then you decided to switch gears a little bit because you need to breathe, still going on, still doing some amazing things. Put out a record last year, went on tour, but in 2019 you decided to start releasing songs as Wilder Woods. What spurred that along?
Well, I mean, a couple of things really. One, we were just as bands get bigger, you end up having to play less, which sounds like the opposite, but it is kind of true. Where you're saying yes to everything coming up, and you can play 150, 200, we did 200 shows a year some years. To where it's like, well, we need to make these bigger events, and so stuff just starts spreading out, and I had more time. So that was one of the things. I kind of got bored with the idea of like, well, I'm only going to write 7 or 8 songs that make a record every 2 years, and I write 50 songs a year. Like I want to leave somewhere to go. And then I started getting into some of the more soul sort of roots of like when I was first coming up and starting to write like that a little bit more. And our fans, honestly, I snuck a couple of those songs on the Need to Breathe records, and like our fans didn't care at all. Like we're like, no. So I was like, man, I'm starting to get an itch to like maybe I should collaborate with some people. And I was moving to Nashville, and I knew that. I was kind of like, man, this would be a good time to just. So it's been really, really fun. And it just, I think the band appreciates it. The guys would say like it's been I go back to the Need to Breathe thing after I've been doing this a little bit with way more inspired and ready to do it. I think it was wearing on me a little bit of like this sort of train is moving down the tracks, and now it's already been determined a little bit. So yeah, just having fun with it.
I was gonna say it gives you that creative outlet to kind of do something a little different, and you know, as I said, Bear Rinehart's the name. Wilder Woods, though, is the solo project. Why not Bear and Wilder
Yeah.
Woods? For those that don't know, where does that name come from?
Yeah, it's the reason that we didn't do the bear thing. We almost called it bare bones there for a little bit. I was like, it needs to be some. I didn't want people to Google the name right away and get all the Need to Breathe stuff. I was just like, man, it'd be nice to just have a fresh, like, I want a new music fan to just not have something in their mind when they listen to it. That was really the reason. And then at the time, I only had two boys, and so they were Wilder and Woods, and I have this memory of like finding an album my dad had made in college when I was a kid, and just thinking like, even though he looked ridiculous on it, and I didn't really like the music or whatever, but it's like it seemed like so cool to me that he had had this other life, so I just thought like the first solo stuff should have that. Like a lot of the songs were written really about them because I was a new dad, and of course you're like learning everything again about life and all that. And so yeah, I named it after them. And now I have a younger one named Waters who I'm sure will be pissed at some point when he's old enough to realize that he doesn't have merch with his name on it.
Well, and then obviously you've been able to do a couple different solo albums. Need to Breathe still putting out albums. How do you kind of? I know it helps you with that creativity, but how do you balance both of those?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I'm still figuring it out in some ways. Really, when it feels like it should go do the other thing. I don't think I would do the Waterwood stuff if I didn't have songs like starting to stack up by the time Need to Breathe was done with something. And so I think that's part of how it works. I'm always like, well, when this tour is over, I'll take a couple weeks off, and then I'll dive into this and just see I'm excited about this year. It's the first time I've had a little more of extended time. The band toured so much in the last year and a half that we kind of can't go out and tour right now. The Need to Breathe can't. So I was like, well, let's take a real year to kind of focus on this. And so obviously doing a tour this year, but I'm going to go out and open in the fall, which hasn't been announced yet. But like I'll do some more dates, like spend a little more time with this project, which has I've needed to do. So I'm glad I'm going to get to this time around.
Well, I've gotten to listen to it, and it's a fantastic album. And to your point of searching for someone, Spotify, thank goodness. At times I love it. I know other times it doesn't always help out everyone, but I was like, who's this Wilder Woods guy? And then you go down the rabbit hole and you figure out who you are and everything.
Yeah.
Um, the Curioso is the next solo album coming out when this airs on Friday the 7th. I read where your grandma's curio cabinet may have been the inspiration for some of the
Yeah.
album.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It's like I never think thematically about a record before I start writing it. I'm sure people do that, but I don't really. I have a collection of songs that I'm kind of like, okay, this feels like the direction, and then I start putting songs in there, and then it starts making sense to me. And this one was like that. it came from the idea. It's like I was telling somebody that the influences on the record were really strange this time. Not strange, not even weird, but more like from specific like times in my life. Like, you know, we were talking about Billy, the coach. It's like he used to have one record in his car, pretty much. It was this Pete Yorn Music for the Morning After. It was like literally, and we would drive back to my house on the weekends for lunch or whatever, and he'd have that one record in there. And so there's like Pete Yorn references on this record, like the way the drums sound on a couple songs and stuff like that. And then there would be like in high school on the way to football practices, alternative station that used to play this old stuff. It's called the Bulldogs out of Athens, Georgia. And like there's a lot of stuff that was a band called Supergrass I liked from back then. It's like some of the drums sound like that, some of the guitars, and so I don't know how I didn't think like this is what I'm doing, but when I listened back to the collection, I was like, whoa, I can really hear different times of my life coming out, and I started thinking about other things visually that do that. You know, my grandmother, who's incredible, Mama Nell is her name, very Alabama Mama name. Um, but she had this bookshelf in her den, and it's like had all the pictures of her grandkids and all that kind of stuff, but like an old Bible, her first, you know, and that's like all marked up. And then like I have a in my studio, I'll show you here. Sorry, one second. Um, but I have this like old, like this is she had one of these. This is a Bear Bryant old Coke bottle thing or whatever. And so like little, and that's I've been in my studio for a while, and that made me think of that thing. And so I started going down. It's like what was on there, and she would take all these mission trips, and you know, and I just remember as a kid seeing this like this thing from Costa Rica and El Salvador and all these like, and it really was just memories for me. And I was like, man, that record feels like that. And so yeah, that's where it came from.
Well, like I said, I got to listen to the album ahead of time. It's fantastic. Two of my favorites are songs you haven't released yet. Love Last and Where Do We Go From Here. Both kind of a little different, and there's kind of some, like you said, there's some different eras, different kind of songs, or at least the way they're presented, that folks might really really enjoy. So, what can they expect on Curioso?
Yeah, it's I think there's more alternative than I've had if you were following along the first couple records. There's a little more alternative means a million things now, but like the way alternative to me is like, you know, 90s and early 2000s kind of alternative, which was just like music was weird and on the radio still. And so there's some elements of that that feels like it creeps into the soul stuff. It's a little less throwback maybe. Um, but the I found that like the songs had a lot of meaning to me. I mean, the songs really are about how I think about love and life and kids and those kind of things. I think because it's a solo record, that's a little bit inevitable. But I think that the earlier records on the Water Wood stuff has been like vibey in a certain way. And there's definitely some of that on this record. Um, but I think there's more of me not worrying about the vibe as much and just worrying about the songs and what I'm trying to say at that time. So yeah, I'm excited to go tour it and do the thing.
Well, and you got to work with some amazing people and even have some amazing guests on the record. I mean, Anna Graves, Maggie Rose, even My Morning Jacket's Jim James. What was it like to maybe call in some favors or at least, work with some really talented folks on this thing?
Yeah, it's I mean, what's crazy, I was thinking about like you kind of forget over the years the chances you get to do that. The band has had crazy collaborations where, you know, just like the stuff that you would never think that we would be able to do. And these were really last minute in a way and also kind of just like for me, Jim James from I'm Already Jack is like he's made solo records too, and he was kind of like the inspiration for the first Wilder Woods record, the way he sings, the phrasing and stuff like that. And I just love he's like a Kentucky kid, but like it's like some weird Southern hippie mesh, you know what I mean, of like psychedelic Southern or something. And I felt like that was me a little bit, being from a small town in South Carolina, making these records that really have different elements than just the Southern part to them. Anyway, so like I was listening to the song "Time on My Hands" that he's on, and just in the studio, and just was like, my dream would be to have this, you know. And the other guys in the thing, I don't think they thought that was real, and I didn't either. I was like, I don't know him, and I don't know like, so. But like a day later, I get an email back from him. He's like, I love this song, want to do it. I mean, 2 days later, we have the vocal and it's in. I was like, this is so that feels surreal to me still. And that's not normally how. Normally, it is a favor. Normally, it is, you know what I mean. It's somebody you know that knows them. It's like some reason. Um, and Anna is on the record. She's got a beautiful voice, but she's an up and coming artist. But like the producer that was working on the record had done work with her, and I was like describing a female voice like with these types of characteristics, and he was like, "I just worked with this girl. What do you think?" And I was like, "That's the one. That's that. I don't know her. I don't." So I think yeah. I mean, just natural is what I would say. Probably, it's the way it happens in the movies, which is not how it happens. You know what I mean? If you ever watch
Sure,
some music
sure.
documentaries, no, I'm telling you, every time you watch, Star is Born, I'm like, oh, sure, they just got up there and played it and didn't rehearse. It's like they're at the Greek theater or whatever. It's like all going magically, and it's not like that. But these collaborations did feel a little bit like that. It's like let's just call them, and they're immediately in, and so yeah, it was cool.
Well, like I said, the album turned out fantastic. Comes out Friday the 7th. I highly recommend it. You mentioned songwriting has kind of been something that you've loved pretty much since the start. What's that process like for you? Because, like you said, on this one, maybe a little more family life experiences than maybe Need to Breathe, but you're kind of writing two different ways, I'm guessing, depending on which project things are going to.
Yeah, honestly, I don't. I've never been really good at that. Like, and it's hard to explain really. It's like I don't really set my mind on what I'm about to write. It just I kind of pull the thread a little bit. Probably the best way to describe it. And so that makes it tricky because I a lot of times don't know as I'm writing the song what it is or which project it would be for until I listen back days later. So occasionally, maybe it's like, oh yeah, I'll take it this way because of the vibe of the song. But most of the time, I'm just writing something I think that I like, and I've had the songs that have lasted for me in my career have been like that, where I'm just like an 8 year old in here. I mean, you're looking at the studio. This is like I come in here and I pick up a guitar and I think it sounds cool, and then I'm like, okay, what about that? Cool. What about this? And I try to let the lyrics match what the music is telling me, which sounds frou-frou and whatever, but it's like that's really what I do. It's I read some thing about I think it was Scott Frost or something. I don't know who it was, but it's like some poet's talking about like, they look out the window and they see a tree, and it's like let's start with that word tree, and go from there. It is a little bit like that. So I fortunately love that process. I'm a pretty serious person, and so coming in here is my chance to just play. And so I kind of do that every day and hope for the best. That's the process.
Well, I mean, honestly, as soon as you said that, I was like, I'm looking at the Eagle Rare bottle and, Buffalo Trace. They let the barrels age, put stuff in there. Some might be a Buffalo Trace, some might be an Eagle Rare. It just depends on where they're at and, what maybe
Yeah.
gave them a little bit of, extra. So, no, I mean, it makes sense. And, you get to do the songwriting and then you get to share those songs. What's the best part of being on a stage for you these days?
I mean, I think two things. One is like there's a thing when you're playing sports that it's like this like flow state or whatever you want to call it, like where you kind of forget where you are, where your feet are not on. It's like there's no thinking involved, and that to me is like when I'm able to get to that place on a stage, it's magic. I mean, there's not a high like it. It just it I really enjoy that. The other part is the interaction that fans have with the songs. Like I'm a big Springsteen fan or those kind of guys. It's like when somebody comes up to me and they have a story of how like it meant something in their life. It's like because people will say like, well, I played this music when my child was born, or we did this at our wedding, or we what that stuff is just like that never gets old in the sense of like knowing that I wrote it in here playing like a kid and just this was my story that I'm telling. It's like the only thing I have to offer, and somehow it's made its way across the country and into somebody's life. I think that's you get to see that in real time because it's like it. I mean, it's trippy. That part's trippy because I'm like watching a movie of these people as they're interacting with the thing, because you look out and it's like that guy's crying and grabbing his brother, and that that this person's dancing, having the time of their life. It's like everybody's experience is different with it, but that's a cool thing to be a part of.
I was gonna say it's awesome when someone can find themselves in your song one way or another, and you talk about being on tour, being on the road a lot. That means you've seen a few different places. So what's one of your favorite, or where are some of your favorite places that you've gotten to go and play and be at?
Um, I mean, I always say the favorite venue, is Red Rocks to me. I went and saw Wilco there years ago before I ever played there and was like, this is a dream, and then got to do that, which is crazy. The Ryman in Nashville is still pretty magic to me. It was always a dream for us being from the South. It was like, this is where you gotta but like now it's really I like Ireland and Scotland a lot, to be honest. I was telling somebody yesterday, I'm like the people are so it's such a blue collar sweet sort of thing, and the love of music is a different kind of. I remember the first time playing there, and it's like you finish the show and they do this soccer chant thing, and I was like, this is so, whereas like in certain cities here, not always, it's changed over the years. But when we first started playing in New York, it was just like so stiff. It's like everybody's too cool to be in there. It's it's the
Get a
opposite
little golf
of,
clap and that's
yeah, totally. I'm like, what?
it.
They're just like looking at the shoes. I'm like, what's happening? Whereas like over there, it was just like, I'm all in. I'll sing along with whatever you got. And so I still appreciate that. We finished up the last tour in Belfast, and I was like, it was beautiful. And so it doesn't necessarily mean, like how big the show is sometimes. But like the sort of involvement is the thing.
Well, and then, obviously Need to Breathe is doing big arenas, different things like that. Wilder Woods, I'm guessing it's working its way up. So how different are the shows for you, and how do you approach those?
I mean, some of the things apply in the sense of like building a show out. I've always appreciated that about the shows that I love to see. I still go see shows and feel like a kid when I'm watching them. So some of that stuff kind of tracks. I think one thing is I don't play as much guitar in the Wildwood stuff. It's dancier, kind of like. And the dream was like always. It's like if this ever gets big enough, like I want to have like a Joe Cocker or Otis Redding or like even James Brown kind of band. Like I want to be the maestro. I want to get up there and, like bam, hit the whatever, have that sort of, because I've always thought like that kind of show is like the most fun to see. And so it's a little bit of that, to be honest. Like that's kind of so we put in some of the stuff where I play and all that, but like I think the general vibe of it is a good time. And so that's and the, obviously venues that are smaller make it a totally different beast. It's like I've had to like reverse learn that when you play clubs, they can tell your intensity. Like it's small enough, they can tell like if veins coming out of your neck or whatever, they can tell like how hard you're going. And then you get in these big, arenas, that's really tough to tell unless it's on the video screen or whatever. So it's like this different, so that all your actions have to get way bigger and weirder. Whereas like I've had to go back, it's like, man, I can actually just get into this and people know they can feel it. So I really have enjoyed that part of it.
Well, and I always like asking this too because it's always different for every artist. But is there a favorite song of yours on the Wilder Woods side that you just love playing right now?
Yeah, a song Maestro, which is from the last record. It You don't always know this when you're like I love the song, we made the song, but then taking it out on tour, it was like the whole room had like somehow has that thing. It's like it all bounces in the same, you know what I mean? It's like you could play this 37 minutes and everybody be fine. Like it just, and so on the last tour, that was the one that set the room off. And partly on this record, there's a couple songs. There's a song called "Time on My Hands" and "Swimming in the Ocean." These are songs that like literally as I was writing them this time was thinking more about the show.
Mm.
So I didn't feel like I had enough of those on the last tour to like keep that energy going for long enough. So there's more, to be had, which I think will be fun. But yeah, that one kills.
I was gonna say you got to give them a good vibe and take them through all the emotions. And like I said, Curioso out February 7th. You mentioned you're going out on some tour dates at different times of the year. So what can folks expect from you in 2025? Because it sounds like a lot of Wilder Woods.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I think Need to Breathe is gonna do. a handful of dates this year, but just not probably any real touring in that way. Just take a little bit of time off and start making a record and all that. But yeah, I think a lot of the Wildwood stuff, we're going to go do some TV and, try to promote the record, try to get people get it in. And that's the biggest challenge with music now. I think it's like there's so many records coming out every week. It's like, how do you get people to take a chance on it? And so that's going to be fun. And then we, like I said, we're going to go out on the opening tour that I'm really excited about in the fall. We haven't announced it yet, so that's why I'm being all coy about it. But because they'd probably sue me or something. But I think that like it's going to be a cool year where I get to tour it a little bit longer and made some tweaks to the band that I'm really excited about. So it's gonna be fun.
I was gonna say that, like I said, I've said it multiple times. Record is fantastic. Like I said, two of my favorites. Love Last. Where do we go from here? And honestly, top to bottom, it's a fun listen. And Bear, thanks for sharing kind of the wild journey of Need to Breathe, the Wilder Woods, and back and forth, and sharing a drink with me, man. Cheers.
Of course, yeah. Cheers, man. Enjoyed it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Find more from Hops and Spirits at hopspirits.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.